My name is Amy Duvall. I'm an interior designer here at Skylab Architecture. And I'll be talking about the Bodecker Foundation, a residential / commercial project that we had worked on, completed in 2017. A little bit about this project. So this was initially started out as a residential building with the intent to help facilitate an artist in residency program for youth and the community beyond. What has been really interesting about it is that since its completion, it has realized into that foundation and practice, being titled the NM Bodecker Foundation. This building is essentially it's a creative house that balances both the natural and built environments, the team being inspired by the creativity of the owner and our client, and the framework that we wanted to create for this building. Some of the key points that I just want to maintain on this screen that you're seeing is this is a view of the main entry. And one of the things we were really inspired by was Gordon Meta Clark's iconic building cuts, which involved the sort of rehabilitation of existing buildings, how you manipulate them to create new and interesting voids and windows. And so this was essentially a renovation of an existing warehouse. And I'll walk through a couple of the slides as we sort of work through to talk through it more. So I just wanted to walk through the history of the site because I think it's really important and it's interesting. It's something that is relevant in our work a lot, of trying to maintain a connection to what was there before. So this is the existing site before the work had begun. This site was previously owned and inhabited PPG paints and printing inks. And then up until this lot had sold in 2012, this was owned, or the operator was Van Dyne Chocolates that operated as a retail and warehouse in here. I think what's sort of unique and interesting about this, both housing a printing ink and chocolate, is that there's a little bit of a nod that we've maintained in some of the building and the architecture and the interior design, sort of take nod to printing inks and the playfulness and the sweetness of chocolate. So this is something that we've sort of brought to the attention of this project. So this was our client, the man on the left sitting on the brightly colored sofa. His name is Sandy Bodecker, and a lot of this project really wouldn't have been realized without him and his vision to create a sense of community for youth, for artists of all ages. And the naming of the foundation is actually in part to his father, the man in the black and white image, who was an illustrator and poet, an author of children's books. So Sandy's vision for this building lives on in the creativity and the meaning that is developed, that they create there today. And the next few slides, I just want to walk through some of the things that are really key in how we develop our stories, our buildings, how we talk about them. One of the things is we have what we call DNA, which is sort of the framework for our buildings, for the architecture, for the interiors, and as they're developed. One of the things we really wanted to think about were these ideas of inhabiting, creating, collaborate, play, share, and transplant. So these are a few images that talked about some of the references that we used, how we think about how space is inhabited, crystalline textures as a way of growth and transplant, lighting, and then also thinking about elements, surface texture, surrealism, color, light, forms, ruins. We were really inspired by the way that, if you think of the way that these portals started to frame up views and create these sort of like ocular interests. And then this is an early diagram that we sort of worked through and thought about the idea. A core component of our work is reintegrating nature. And so one of the thought processes was that, how do we think about reintegrating nature into this urban landscape through transportation or transplantation? So think about how landscape is sculpted. Where can we put plants that sort of relate to the architecture? How do we create openings that really manipulate views and create and tell stories about the people and creatives that are inhabiting these spaces? And I just wanted to work through, like, these are some early sketches that the team was developing as we thought about this building, how we think about layering, the sort of the development of these crystalline structures, different ways that we think about how views are made, which is a really another key component of our work. And then what you see in this upper image is how some of these start to layer in and color code with program. So as we had begun to distill the DNA, these elements that were inspirational to us, the challenge with this one was how to form a singular new building while retaining the memory and the qualities of the former historic boundaries. So we really wanted to focus on this program of the living is central to it. There's this idea of camping or commune, almost like you're camping at the beach. There's the art portion, and carport, autoport. There's this combination of music and skate. And some of those is because the client had such a deep interest in music, and creating a performance space and skateboarding, central to the development of Nike SB. So that component and that relationship was woven into the fabric of this building. And then also providing in this urban landscape the opportunity for gardens for people to relax and enjoy the sort of a courtyard. And so out of that, we had created, based on the tenets of inhabit, create, collaborate, play, share, and transplant, this diagram that realized itself into this space plan as we thought about how the overlaps of the art studio and the music studio and where people can gather and dine and where they can play and where they can share ideas essentially transpired into a collage that we like to call this building. And so it was also really important to share the early work that was internal for us, as we began to think about how nature reintegrated into this space, how these spaces flowed from one another, and how we balanced both the natural and built environments. And then just rolling into these ended up being the final drawings for the building. So out of the development of the sort of crystalline structure, one of the things was trying to maintain some of the existing warehouse, which is this boat truss building here on the left, and then maintaining an element of the existing concrete facade on the right, with the network of the new program sort of intermingling and overlapping in between. And then, as one of the key components was how, with this angular geometry, how do we include a softness within the landscape, within the surrounding parts and pieces, to allow a dynamic quality with the building, with the architecture. Incorporating the skate bowl was really crucial. What's really cool is that there's, with the music studio, recording studio right next to it, what often transpires is that recordings are made in the skate bowl itself. And the recording studio, there's a lot of different components or different zones where people can actually record in the building, which is really exciting and speaks to the thought process of trying to make this building as versatile as possible. And then the other component of this was, as we had completed documentation for it, we actually, Skylab took on this project as a construction company. We've had interest in doing contracting work, and so this was an opportunity for us to be the contractors and architects. So this is some demo work that was happening within, this was the existing bow truss building. As we took out these pieces, and what's really unique about some of these structural elements as a way to sort of integrate them into the new building is that some of these bow truss structures actually show up in the existing building later as it's completed. So this is after more significant completion had done, we start to see the cladding of the facade, the exterior facade being clad here. We start to get a look into the art studio space and the maintaining of the existing structure in this warehouse portion. And then just some thoughts and complexities around the music studio. We had worked with a recording studio consultant who was instrumental to our development of how we think about acoustics in the spaces, and then how we make it playful. So these black lines start to be the framework for fabric wrapped panels that are inset in there. And then, as moving through these completed photos, I think what is really impressive and the things that are really meaningful for us, for me and our firm, is the way that this when it was completed provides the amount of opportunities that it provides for people to gather and celebrate each other, to celebrate the creative energy that's in there. So one of the things is that we have apartments above on the second level that break out of these wings. And then down below, we have this main central artist space with a dining room / conference room here. We have what we call the beach, and another aerial view with the opportunity to look into the residence here. And then this is an image showing some of the existing structure tying back to this concrete wall that we wanted as we sort of created this courtyard. And then the opportunities with how we wanted to also think about how we integrated lighting as a mimic of form and also interest with the skate bowl. So this is more shots of the sound booth and recording room of the music studio. And then we had shared the photo of Sandy and his father at the beginning of these slides, and it's really important too. So one of the things that we integrated as a way of architecture and interiors blending was this custom wallpaper and graphic that was integrated on seating and as accents throughout the space. These illustrations are Niels Mogen's excerpts from some of his books, and the imagery we selected is based on sort of capturing what our mood of Portland was, and that this really trying to create a sense of whimsy and playfulness to maintain this sort of youthful energy throughout this space.
Amy, can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
Since you mentioned you're the interior designer, I want to know your view about this. You have this complexity and unique shapes. And I know lots of designers avoid going through this path because they don't know how to manage the functionality of the space. Do you have any tips on how we can, because it's really a thin line between this is a completely functional or we have this uniqueness in the spaces. So do you have any tips or advice on how we can go to this path and make it like manage it in the way that you did?
Mm-hmm. I think what this project really presented in having these sort of complex shapes and unique qualities is that because of the number of angles that showed up in plan, what this sort of created was we really, it pushed us to think about program that could be situated in these spaces. Like, is it an area of work? Is it an area where you want to experience a more intimate, quiet zone, an area of respite, areas of play? And what was really unique about this building is that because of the geometry of the architecture and of plans and elevations of how they sort of realized is that those pockets created really dynamic zones and really dynamic qualities for program to live. So this is the image in the center is an offshoot of one of those angles. And, we turned it into areas of work, filling in with bathroom program when needed. But
sometimes you just got to find your path through this uniqueness.
Yeah. And I think often it's one of those where if architecture is presenting itself in a way that feels natural to us, I think it's serving the building and it's serving the space to think about how this, in what ways this can really push or develop the space to make it more interesting. If this whole building were rectangular and we try to think about these spaces in the same way, I think the outcome wouldn't have been as special. There's sort of a uniqueness that that these spaces became because of the geometry of the architecture, which I think was really important.
I think we also engage with those unique forms very early on. So we engage, because we take it in very early, it's sort of like wholeheartedly we all get into that process.
The project grows into this path,
Definitely. I think that's how it's sort of.
That that's a very well way of to define the identity of this project. Yeah.
Yeah, and to what Louise was saying as well, our practice, our studio is very integrated when it comes to thinking about architecture and interior design. We really think about them as spaces holistically and don't really we don't really draw designations between the two. So that I am an interior designer, but a lot of the work that we do is very crucial and often happens at the beginning of a project where there's dialogue around both the exterior and the interior. We think about these spaces holistically as well.
I think fluidity, the fluidity between the team.
Yeah,
that's an important part. That team is always engaged in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just want to go back a bit on the irregular forms that we were talking about. You mentioned that there's a unique way to like experience these spaces because of the geometry of the shape of the form. But is your approach, does the experience come beforehand, like during the design stage, or do you just make the forms first and then it's like a pleasant surprise that what comes after through the experience?
I think it's a little of both. We definitely think about the experience and of the different people inhabiting the space. We think about that before architecture, before walls really start to be drawn. It is a crucial part in how we think about that. And then it just it evolves, as we develop these spaces. I think for us, there's this push to develop the experience, because architecture is for people, and that this space, because it had this community and home mindset at the start. It was really important for us to keep in mind the experience quality of someone moving throughout the space, and as some of it shifts as we think about the necessary structure and mechanical that needs to be integrated into this building, but we always come back to what the experience is like as you move through it, as finishes start to be selected and thought of, that it's important.
I think also something I think is unique to us, sort of like, as soon as we start drawing these spaces as being used. We always show how they would be used, and the conversation is there from very early on, sort of thing. So I think that's something that I feel is unique here in the way we work.
But since you mentioned that, okay,
Yes.
Lionel, go ahead.
And what are the other things that factors that dictated the shapes, is aside from the experience, like such as the openings, the location of these openings of these forms? Are there other things that you considered, or is it like more on a random type of approach?
I don't know if it was. I wouldn't say it was random. So this is a really good reference. So we're on the third floor. One of the things that was really central to developing this was thinking about this core of the central core of creativity. And one of the things that we like to integrate into a lot of our work is sort of having these cones of light, or these cones of view that sort of telegraph through the buildings. And so in thinking about this central core as a moment of creativity, we wanted to also draw the attention and integrate natural light using skylights over these forms. We'll often use some of the perforations that we had in the ceilings and the roof is responding to the forms directly below, as our way to draw attention to it. So this centralizing skylight was one of them. But I think in the development of the fractal nature of this was we had sketched through a lot of different different ideas for it. And one of the reasons for why it sort of arrived at this fractal nature was because of this. There's this thought process around how do you, when you think about erosion, what does that look like? Does it feel like a moment in time where it's an interval, and it's this momentary break from a more rectangular geometry? And what those moments of erosion started to incur was having this relationship of the walls and program around it respond to that. Which, looking at, this is an aerial view of the completed building, but you can sort of see that where this wedge here was one of those moments of the landscape coming in. It's covered partially by this building, but this was another sort of at our entry points and moments of transition. We thought about these points sort of interjecting and creating moments of pause.
But I have one question. Since you mentioned working in the team, and I specifically have this question from you because you have this defined way of designing and you have this uniqueness to your design. When you work in a team, like everyone in the team are on the same page, like you have these priorities, you have this slide, or everyone brings their own take and you find a way to gather all around and make it work?
I think it's a little of both. We come to the table. There are, depending on your role on the team, when we were starting this project, there's a lot of research of inspiration and just understanding who the client was. And so the team collectively had done that. And then we work very in person and in a collaborative environment. So there is a lot of shared ideas. So each individual person may come to the table with their own ideas, but through development and sketching that we sort of arrive at a collective vision of what the project and process is.
But we have this discussion in the show about the design of creative space and how it really helps people when you kind of give them the space and they can decide how to use it.
Yeah. We really, that was a core component of trying to think about the flexibility of these spaces. So what's really unique now is that they use them for both workshops, they use them for artist in residencies. They have large events and speaking engagements that happen at this building. So it's really impressive to see the guests and the community utilize these spaces to the full capacity. Some of the furniture moves around. So we also, one of the things in thinking about where people gather is, are there distinct moments where we say, like, yes, these are moments of respite. These are moments where people can take a step back. And then there's other opportunities where, all of these tables, for example, can just move around and reconfigure and adapt to the needs of the space. Same with all the furniture out here as well. And some of the reasoning for how we approach certain rooms to be furnished is in response to the architecture, is in response to the programming of the room, to push that vision even further.
And since you have this variety of angles and shapes, you give them kind of small pockets and big pockets. Like they can decide this is a gathering place, this is a solo working places, and
Yeah.
it's really flexible for them as well.
Yeah, and what's very clear now to see of how some of the angles lean themselves to facilitating program is, so this is, for example, this is the first level of the building. We have this centralized core of creative art space, and off of these wings, so in one form is the shared kitchen, and then on the other side is essentially the art studio workshop. And as we when we thought about program and changing scale, then we also thought about how these other fractal wings responded in kind. So the music studio was a big component of this building, of wanting to be provided for it. So there was this natural response to locate, not just from an equipment perspective, but from a functionality of having this recording studio and music studio on this level, and having a connection to the dining room, meeting room opposite of it. And that a lot of the program on this level is that we wanted it to be open and access all around the building, and have these different moments that facilitated that.
I think the other thing is these are this is sort of incredibly flexible as well. The times I've been in this building have been when presentations have been done up in the top right-hand corner, and it has just allowed a gathering of people, which probably is not usually the number that are in this building, but it is actually a really comfortable space to be in. It's sort of intimate as well.
Exactly, the great level of flexibility. And another thing that I'm really curious to know about your work is your material picking and setting the mood, because you figure this out very well in the projects. Can you expand more on that, how you go to this process?
Yeah, so a lot of it is when we began investigating in those in the DNA and the elements, often is a crucial component tied to it is the response to the site. And one of the things that we like to integrate into our work a lot is this idea of contrast and responsiveness to the client, to their own personal story. So some of the things that when we thought about finishes here, that we wanted things, we thought about them in a way that was about flexibility, that was about durability. The levels, the upper levels are plywood clad walls in ACX plywood. And part of the reasoning for that is that we wanted this space, if artists wanted to add things later, to draw on them, to paint on them, that there was this inherent nod to a material that spoke to more of a utility and hard-wearing working quality. And then the opportunities of color and softness that were integrated into these spaces outside of those hard-wearing materials were really in response to Sandy's vision and the whimsical and the draw for him to have this sort of push for a youthful energy into it. So thinking about utility and softness of the spaces, definitely wanting to create this sort of playful energy, within the space. So as the other so that playful energy, but then also with the artwork, with the client's artwork that he had, there was this level of vibrancy that we really wanted to set a backdrop for and create interest for. So one of the things was we wanted to, when it came to color, we wanted to really integrate these highly saturated moments and create really wonderful places for vibrancy to occur. When it came to some of these more muted spaces like the recording studio, there's a lot of pragmatic requirements that were needed acoustically. And so some of the things that we started to layer in, we wanted to integrate the sense of natural materials where possible as a nod to the sort of the reintegrating nature and speaking to the transplant nature of those. It's also really important in our work to have these areas where there are moments of deep saturated color. We wanted to use natural materials as a respite for it, as a backdrop. One of the key flooring elements was on the ground level is a pigmented concrete. And we stuck with concrete just because of the hard-wearing nature of it, that people can, like, it may not feel precious for them. And we really tried to think about how materials felt, if they felt too precious or not precious enough, but just wanting to think about utility here. And the moments of color and vibrancy we integrated in terms of like horizontal or vertical surfaces in the form of pattern making. And so that was one of the ways that we really thought about materials here. We also used materials as moments of defining those spaces and those zones and creating visible opportunities of transition. So in this image, this is one of the residential units here. We wanted to think about in this wooden box, almost like a treehouse cabin, how the floors responded to that break, how they responded to the opening up of this view here.
And how long did you spend on designing and construction of this project?
So this project, we had in our office, I believe, at 2014, and then in the design and construction of it was completed in 2017.
And did you have any problem with the structure, like the engineering part, because you have this variety of shapes and angles?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're looking at for the structure was what were the opportunities for the structure to be if it was wood framed. We've done a lot of modular prefabricated projects in the past using a home, what we call the home system. And it originally started as can we develop this building utilizing prefabricated modules? And the nature of working with the boat truss building and the complexities of it, we worked with a really phenomenal engineer to develop all of the steel structures that required all the steel and supports that were required for this building. And I can walk back through to some of those under construction moments.
Didn't we also keep a section of facade with concrete?
Yeah.
Correct.
So Yes, so actually this portion and this wall, and there's a wall sort of on this side where those are all the existing concrete structures. So the walls of the warehouse and much of the footprint of this building is actually existing that we refinished, but left as is. So the footprint of the new addition is essentially almost floating within it, floating within the existing site.
But do you often like change this design during the construction?
I think that there were, from a structural point of view, no, but a lot of this had been developed when we had up until construction. I think that there were smaller changes that may have happened that were either finish related or maybe custom cabinetry related, but a lot of the walls and the formwork and everything as it started out in plan carried through. One of the things may have been like the development around the centralized stair. So I think there are moments that we had thought about pushing this concept more, like how some of these elements responded to the architecture as it was realizing itself.
Yeah, true.
I think also the fact that as this was a project where we were the contractors too, was sort of allowed for that sort of probably a little more change than you do when you're with
you had the freedom in this one.
Yeah, a little more freedom, shall we say? Yes.
Yeah.
But we have this like way of thinking. We had this with some designer that they kind of develop the project in the construction. For sure, it's not possible for every place, every site, and every country, but sometimes it really can help to make this like the vision, make it complete in the site.
I think in this situation, we were lucky to have a really dedicated client who had bought, that is often when you have that client buy-in, you can really start to push a lot of those things up front and know that, and if there is an issue on site, they're often the people that you'll resort to make a decision as well.
It's true. Yeah.
Maybe just last question from me. Since there was already an existing structure, was there an attempt to preserve parts of it for historical? I mean, like value in the past, or was there due to completely renew the image of the building?
There wasn't a historic review requirement that needed that
it actually fell outside the historic district.
Yeah,
this one building, so it was really close to it, but it actually fell outside it. So it actually allowed for more freedom in that respect.
I think one of the things too is that like when we had looked at the site as it had started, like there's a recognition of beauty in this bow truss warehouse building, and that was something that the team really wanted to integrate into the new into the design of like thinking about the new architecture on this site as an intervention into the existing rather than a whole removal of the existing footprint before. So I think that was a key component of how we sort of how the intersection and intervention of new versus old responded to one another.